Welcome to the Babylonian. I'm the co-host Peter, and this season we're going to be exploring the New Testament Apocrypha. If you'd like to, there's going to be summaries and notes at thebabylonian.com, which you can find in the description. With that being said, with the sages, scholars, and the scriptures, let's Bible on.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening to whoever's listening to this based on what time you're listening. Peter, good afternoon.
Middle of the night. Good middle of the night.
Yeah, can't forget the nighttime stalkers, the graveyard shifts. Yeah, it's true.
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Peter, today is your day in terms of apocryphal New Testaments.
Does this mean we're doing the Gospel of Peter?
Yes, indeed we are.
Let's go.
So we have gone over the Gospel of Thomas, which is kind of its own genre. And then this also is kind of like a ministry passion. Well, yeah, this is like a passion gospel, specifically a resurrection gospel. And the reason this was created, and I actually learned this from listening to, I can't remember when he was popular. I think it was a year ago that Wes Huff started to become really popular, but I remember him referencing this on his interview with Joe Rogan. I think that's the only thing I've seen a couple clips with him, but other than that, he mentions this apocryphal gospel. And I actually didn't know this, but what he mentions is that the reason that this apocryphal gospel was made was because Christians were scandalized by the fact that in all of the canonical gospels, the first eyewitnesses to Jesus's resurrection are women who wouldn't have had a say in court. And so therefore their testimony would have been seen as less valid in the first century patriarchal society. So with that being said, this is a very early apocryphal gospel. This is dated to around, so maybe there's some basis for this being before 150, but it's between 150 and 200. It seems like the author maybe might have been unintentionally a little bit Gnostic, and Origen and Eusebius reference this. Okay? Despite early debates on its early dating, it appears that the text is also based on canonical gospels, according to modern scholars.
Do we want to real quick explain who Eusebius and Origen are?
Yeah, do you want to take that away?
I mean, well, so Eusebius is the person who writes up our history going up to when the Council of Nicaea happens. So he's the historian. When people say, oh, what was the early church like? Like, we know a lot about it through Eusebius, because at that time, it's like, what, 325? Is it 325 for Council of Nicaea? Okay, so, yeah. Around then, he's giving that history. And then Origen is one of the Christian leaders from the city of Alexandria. And so his kind of, he was an early writer. That's what I got on Origen. Yeah. I don't know what he's famous for.
He's an OT, original theologian. I mean, he's famous
I thought you were saying like Old Testament. I was like,
yeah, I did just recognize that is the standard abbreviation for Old Testament. I didn't realize it was that funny, but yeah, original theologian. But he is famous for, I think it's called On First Principles, which I think is like a summation of his theology. He's definitely famous for what's called the Hexpla, which is like, I think 6. Wait, does hex mean 6?
Hex means 6, yeah. Pent means 5.
6.
Penta.
Yeah, so it's then 6 different manuscript traditions. I think just for the Hebrew Bible, but it might also be the New Testament. Some of his more wacko beliefs got condemned as heresy in the Council of Chalcedon. Can't remember which council. I don't know. But anyways, yeah, nonetheless, besides some of his kind of weirder ideas, like the pre-existence of the souls, like that you exist before you're born, he is like a beast, a theology beast in the early church. And Eusebius is known as not just an early church father, but the father of church history, like you said, because he's living during the Council of Nicaea, so he's kind of the dude who put all of that stuff together. So yeah, that's good. Thanks for explaining that. So the Gospel of Peter, should we dive in?
Yeah.
So this begins where with Herod commanding that Jesus be taken off to be executed, which already is incongruent with the canonical Gospels, because Herod is like directly saying that Jesus should be executed rather than him passing him back to Pontius Pilate, Pilate washing his hands and saying pretty much for himself, making himself feel better by saying, oh no, I'm not going to be guilty of this, his blood be on your hands, but really handing him over. So then this is interesting. Then as we fast forward and we get to the point where Jesus is being crucified, there's a note that as Jesus is being crucified, he actually doesn't feel the pain. It says, and they brought 2 malefactors and crucified the Lord between them, but he held his peace as if he felt no pain. So I guess you could technically interpret it as if he did feel pain, but he just shows as if he has no pain. But either way, that's definitely incongruent with the canonical gospels, where he says, I thirst, where he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? And he's definitely in pain. And so the thief on the cross tells the soldiers that Jesus did no wrong, and then they are angered, so they decide not to break his legs so that he'll die slower. Which, to be fair, I think to me, does sound like a better explanation for why the soldiers wouldn't break his legs, which, by the way, is quoted in the canonical gospels as being like a fulfillment of a prophecy. Do you remember the prophecy that fulfills, or the verse, just what it says?
There's like some verse that talks about his bones not being broken at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you break the knees, you break the bones. But is that in Isaiah?
I think it's Psalm 22.
One.
I want to say it's Psalm 22.
Just kidding, not Isaiah.
Yeah. I mean, Isaiah's classic, though. I mean, if there's a prophecy, that's, good guess. So yeah, anyways, then as Jesus is on the cross, it gets so dark that people have to use lamps to move around. And they're tripping in the dark as if it's midnight. And after Jesus dies, so this is as he's on the cross versus when he dies. And then after Jesus dies at 3 p.m., which is the same in the canonical gospels, the 9th hour, the sun shines again. So it's interesting. So then we have the Jewish elders say that they have done evil. They admit that they have done evil. They lament. They say that Jerusalem will come to an end because of the signs that happened when Jesus died, which must have meant that Jesus was righteous. They then decide to ask Pilate to have guards watch the tomb so that the disciples don't steal the body. So the interesting thing here is that the Jews confess to being wrong, but then they still go to the extent to having Jesus covered up, which is interesting, which you could understand, that's nowhere out of bounds of human nature. But nonetheless, it doesn't really seem to, I guess there are some stories in the canonical gospels where the Jews kind of recognize that Jesus has power and is doing stuff, but either they seem to assign that to evil spirits, or they seem to doubt it, So anyways, the night before Jesus' resurrection, a loud voice comes from the sky. It opens up and 2 men come down to the tomb. The stone in front of it starts to roll by itself, and then the men enter. These men, of course, are obviously angels. So then the guards awake after the 2 men go into the tomb, and then they see that the 3 men, that is the 2 men, the angels, and Jesus go out, one being supported by the other 2, with a cross following them. That's an interesting detail. They all reach for heaven, but one reaches beyond the heavens. A voice comes from the heavens asking, have you preached to those who sleep? And the cross answers, yes. Which that is just such a dope, I don't know. I guess that's the pretty cool reference, which we're actually going to get more from in our next episode on, no, not our next episode, 2 episodes in the future on Christ's descent into Hades. But that's just a pretty dope explanation. Peter, do you want to explain what that's talking about? The voice from heaven asking whether or not the cross has preached to those asleep?
Yeah, there's a part in the New Testament where it describes, it's in 1 Peter chapter 3, where it talks about him preaching to those who, I don't know if it was imprisoned in bondage or something like that, since the time of Noah. So that's kind of probably what it's like hinting at, because they know that. Interesting. 1 Peter, and then it's appearing in the Gospel of Peter.
Whoa, I never made that connection. That is interesting.
But I do have a question. What do you think?
Yeah.
And of course, we'll explain that more in the future episodes. But what do you think the significance of them taking the cross out of the tomb? Like, one, how do you fit a cross in a tomb? But like, what do you think the significance is? Anyway, I don't know how big. I've never Cena,
Joseph
a
of Arimathea was
size
like,
scale of a big, but like also I don't know how big a cross is, but I guess what do you think the
I
significance
mean,
of
it's
that
bigger than a human, right?
Yeah, it
Because
has to
you
be
have
bigger
to
than
fit
a human.
Yeah.
Well, so does the
It
tomb
has
have
to
to
be
be,
taller
right?
than
They
a
have to put the
human.
body in the. Yeah, I mean, so does the tomb, right? Because you got to put the body in there. I don't know.
Joseph
Yeah,
of
okay,
Arimathea was really like, hey, can I bury Jesus? And then the reason Nicodemus came with him was to carry the cross after him. Make sure that goes in the tomb.
yeah, there's a 2-person job. I'll take the body, you take the. But yeah, well, it obviously had some level of significance that someone thought to go ahead and write, hey, let's go make sure that there's a cross coming out of the tomb.
Yeah.
So like, it makes you wonder, like, what's the significance of that? Like from a literary perspective. And I guess what I'm thinking of is in the Gospel of John, at the end, Jesus has holes in his hands, right? Which means you can still see the impact of the cross into the resurrection. And so perhaps they're like trying to say, hey, like, I don't know. They're trying to say that there's some level of connection from even though of the events of the cross that kind of carry with Jesus, but also Jesus was dead on the cross and he is not dead post Easter Sunday. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, technically, you could also make an argument, and spoiler alert, but in 2 seasons, we'll get to a part where Jesus literally has to bring his physical cross into Hades and leaves it there, for the faithful dead to go and be with him. But man, what was I going to say? But, like the cross, one thought is that perhaps there's iconographic implications, perhaps, but I'm a little bit more worried about this because this is a very early text, and I think Christianity was, my understanding of Christianity is that it was pretty anti-images, especially just because of a lot of these are non-Jews coming out of a pagan culture that did base so much of their worship on idols. But yeah, man, I forgot where I was going with that. But yeah, just the idea that like there had to be something in Hades that was there as a monument to bring people up to be with Jesus, as we'll see in those two episodes later.
Oh, so you're saying like the cross as an icon. So sometimes when we talk about icons, like there's like the image, right? The physical image, but like an icon as in like something that I know this in the context of like Martin Luther times that you like go to and you can take time out of purgatory from other things. So you take like a toenail from a whatever person that's significant and suddenly it's, like, and then it can like take time out of indulgence. So you're saying like perhaps the significance of taking the cross out of the tomb is that the cross itself is an icon, and so it kind of shows a lot of value to it. That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that. So I mean, we're obviously speculating here.
Yeah. But I think this is what I was originally going to say, but that I had forgotten is actually it's interesting that God or the voice from heaven specifically asks the cross and not Jesus if it had preached to those below. So I wonder if almost there was like a variant, there was a variant tradition or an early tradition that this would be a variant tradition because the Apostles' Creed dates to, I think, just the beginning of the 2nd century. So I think this would be a variant tradition where the cross does the preaching instead. I don't know. But I just know that like sometimes you like being pedantic and like asking these silly questions of like, oh, but a cross can't preach. Well, yeah, also a cross can't respond to words that are coming out of heaven. Perhaps like, I don't know. That's just a thought. That's just a crazy out there theory of that maybe somebody needs to like do their thesis or dissertation work on of like, Jesus brought the cross down for the cross to preach to the people in his tradition. So I don't know. That's definitely not worth a thesis or dissertation. But yeah, that's a good question though. That's a good point. Yeah.
If someone writes a really,
I don't know
really
about here in
good
this
thesis.
text.
If someone writes a really, really good thesis on it, then it's worth it. Because we don't know what there is behind that. So, maybe there's something amazing behind that.
I mean, it'll definitely be original for sure. Yeah. So, yeah. So anyways, the cross explains that So the question is, the question is, have you, the cross, the voices to the cross? And this is after Jesus has ascended. Have you, cross, preached to those in sleep? And the cross answers yes. So technically, literally, it does seem like there's a point in Jesus goes up into heaven. The Father could have asked Jesus, but he asks the cross. Okay. All right. My point.
Interesting.
going forward. So then the guards see Jesus descend from heaven and enter the tomb, which is just so interesting because Jesus is like, he's like kind of limping around, like, he has to have his hands on these like angels' back, ascend into heaven, ascend even further into heaven. He goes further into heaven than the angels who he needed to support him while he was on the earth. Then he comes back down, descends from heaven, enters into the tomb. And then they go off. So then these soldiers, after they see Jesus descend from heaven and enter the tomb, they go off at night to tell Pilate that he really was God's son. So here we have, of course, the first real witnesses of Jesus' resurrection. But Pilate says that it was them that wanted to kill the Son of God. So actually it's on them. Then the soldiers plead with Pilate not to tell any king or master about it, because it is better to make ourselves guilty of the greatest sin before God than to fall into the hands of the Jews. So you definitely see a little bit of offloading some of the responsibility of Pilate, because it seems, Pilate does blame the soldiers, but then the soldiers just assume responsibility. So that's interesting. And we're going to, in the next episode, we're going to be going over all this literature, Pontius Pilate literature anyways, that's trying to do that. But that's just interesting. And
it's going to be a theme.
Yeah. And this also explains why
and make him look good.
Yeah, which is interesting. Another point where this is, kind of a little bit rubbing up against the Apostles' Creed. But the other interesting thing is they plead with Pilate not to tell anyone. So of course that's why they didn't write this down, because they didn't convert like the centurion in the Gospel Mark. So it's important that there's two. Remember, on the count of 2 or 3 witnesses, things will be verified. So it's important that there are 2 male guards who see everything, because of the witness of the women. And then it said Mary Magdalene is said to be a woman disciple of the Lord. She had not done at the sepulchre of the Lord what women are accustomed to do for their dead loved ones. So she's explained to be a disciple of the Lord. And so perhaps she has a special place in Jesus's ministry. Well, no, she does have So she does have a special place in Jesus's ministry. But it uses the word disciple there. So, perhaps she's part of the broader 70 or 500 or even broader than that. But perhaps the thing that Mary was doing that women are not accustomed to do for their dead loved ones, as it quotes in the text, is to go see Jesus alone without men. I'm assuming that's what this text is saying. I honestly don't know the whole history behind that, but it does seem to, although on the one hand it is pointing out that she's a disciple, it does kind of say like, hey, she wasn't supposed to do that, which is interesting. I don't know. Yeah. So, but that's it. That's the end. That's the whole end of the story. So thoughts on that? Thoughts on the whole thing? That's the whole apocryphal gospel that, somebody attributed to your predecessor.
Wow. Dang. I was named after that guy, not the person who wrote this, but the Apostle Peter, who they said wrote this, whatever.
Well, obviously the Apostle Peter wrote this because the guards couldn't have written it because they didn't want the guilt on their hands. So yeah, anyways, sorry. Yes.
Yeah. Peter was watching as the guards left, and then he went back and disappeared. And then the women found Jesus, and then they went and told him, and then he went back.
Yeah.
Anyway. Okay. Yeah. I mean, wow. Interesting. It's interesting. It's short, right? At least your summary of it is short, and it also is a passion one, right? The passion ones are the ones that are passion apocrypha are focused on the time of the passion when Jesus dies and rises again. Is his resurrection included in the passion, or would you say the passion is mostly the time when he's dying?
It's definitely included in this apocryphal gospel.
Sure. Anyway, yeah, interesting. So I guess we orthodoxy index it, right?
Yeah. Do you want to give a stab at that first, since this is attributed to having your name?
Put all the pressure on me. I'll give it a. I'm going to give it an 8. Maybe I should be giving it a 7, but I'll give it between a 7 or an 8. I'm not giving it a 9 or a 10. 7.5. We'll go with 7.5. The reason crosses can't speak. Crosses can't speak, and it seems to, by trying to have male witnesses, undermine the value that God puts in women, and women being able to have significant roles in ministry, like by trying to take that away, the roles that God has for women, and by taking away the opportunity for women to go ahead and say that Jesus resurrected from the dead, because they're women, I think that is, pretty problematic. So maybe I'm too generous by giving them a 7.5, but I think that and the cross, right? Crosses don't speak back. So I think that's where I'm at.
Yeah. I mean, apologetics, I think apologetics 101 for Christianity is that women were some of the first witnesses to Jesus' resurrection. Well, maybe apologetics 102. I mean, there's other stuff about gospel manuscript tradition and martyrdom and nonetheless, but my eyes just like lit up as you're saying this, because I've heard this a million times from my apologetics 101 classes and such, taking those over and over again. Not literally, of course, but because it just started to click with me, and I'm just like external processing. So, smack me on the virtual head if I'm wrong. But like, I was just thinking that, like, what if the reason that, God had it so that, and I guess maybe you could be just super free will and say that, it's just how it happened that women came first. But the reason that women came first is also like a literary connection to Genesis 3, where now, it was the woman who first ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and listened to the deceiver and gave it to man, that now the women are the first people to see the resurrected bodily Jesus and announce those news to the others. I don't know. That might be a stretch.
That's
But
interesting. It might be a stretch. I haven't put any thought to that yet. So
it just hit me as you were saying that. And I was hearing that for the 500th time of the point of like women being there. But I do think, like, I was actually thinking in the same ballpark, 8 or 7, but I think I'm going to give it a 7 because it is technically orthodox. So I'm going to give it a passing grade. But nonetheless, everything that it's trying to do is against the logic of the Gospels. Like, take pressure off of Pontius Pilate and make Pontius Pilate look better than he is. Okay. The canonical Gospels, not trying to do that. Put more blame on the soldiers. On the contrary, as I pointed out in Mark, the centurion is the first person to say, truly, this is the Son of God. Like, to like figure it out, like, oh, that's who this is. Or not the first person to say that, but like, for it to like really like click with, like, as he's dying, like, oh, the suffering servant. 3, Herod, is made to be this. Well, okay, yeah, I guess Herod is made, but I guess it's just hard to make Herod look like a good guy. So I guess there's nothing there with Herod. But yeah, like, just every single rhetorical point of this gospel is wrong. But it's not wrong on anything key, except, well, no, it does say, so it has Jesus not feeling pain, and unintentional or not, it's not accurate. Jesus did feel pain.
So my question is, why is that problematic that Jesus does not experience pain?
I would say because he's not human enough. And not only that, like, there's something to him bearing. Man, okay, there's a deeper Christological response that I don't know, because I am not on my A game for that. But like, I guess I would say like he had to go through the crucifixion, and it wasn't just nothing for him to go through the crucifixion. Like, it was like he was actually suffering for humanity. I guess that's another point where it like rubs up against the Apostles' Creed. So I guess I'm gonna have to give this a 6, a just failing grade, because even though accidental, like, it's still like the Apostles' Creed, he suffered under Pontius Pilate. And so, yeah, I guess I would have
so right at the time of this recording, there's a lot of dialogue going back and forth about the discussion of a penal substitutionary atonement, and if it's true or not. So basically, penal substitutionary atonement is the belief that Jesus died for the sins of people, and like, in the sense that he was punished instead of other people being punished.
He paid the price.
Like, yes, and he paid the price. And right now, my perspective kind of, well, regardless of what my perspective is, that's not relevant to this. So
good save.
One thing that one of the people who's arguing against penal substitutionary atonement, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he wrote a book called Lamb of the Free. And John Mark Comer tweeted on this, which started up the controversy. One of his reasoning, my understanding is, because I was reading a summary from someone who was thinking through this, is that the view of the gospel is a lot participatory. And don't worry, I'm going to link this into Why Suffering Matters. So when the gospel authors the New Testament authors were thinking through the significance of Jesus's death, a lot of times they like quote the significance of, like, because we die with him rather than him dying for us, it means we die with him. Not to say that there isn't passages that talk about him dying for us as well. And so if you look at, but a large portion of them are. So an example of this is Galatians 2:20 is the really popular one. I've been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. So it starts with, I've been crucified with Christ, not just that Christ died for me. And then the other one that's coming to my mind right off the bat is, it left my mind right off the bat too. The other one that comes to my mind is, I think it's in 2 Timothy 3, where it says, if we've been crucified with him, we'll be raised with him, right? So right there, it's talking about the crucifixion and the resurrection, but it's saying that we identify with him. One thing that's significant is if we see the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus as being participatory, meaning that we're participating in it, then that means that our suffering has meaning, which fits with 1 Peter chapter 2, right? 1 Peter chapter 2, Peter's talking to the slaves and he's like, hey, like, because to this you have been called, because Christ also suffered, though he was like, I don't know, they hurt him or attacked him, said things against him. He did not threaten or hit back. I don't remember. And so anyway, but it's very participatory. And then, it ends with the big, he himself bore our sins in his body on the tree that we might die to sin and live to righteousness, which once again, right, that we might die and live, participatory. So anyway, all that to be said, the significance that I can think of right off the bat, right, and is that it matters that Jesus suffers, because if our view of the cross is significant because we participate in his death and resurrection, that means that our suffering has meaning as Christians. And so that would make it very significant.
That's good. Yeah. So like you're saying, so pretty much your point is like, even especially with this Petrine letter, okay, fancy word there, when the Apostle Peter, before he wrote this unintentionally heretical semi-Gnostic gospel, he was actually writing, explaining like the importance of, and is there a term for this like conception of like participating in the passion? Because if not, like,
I don't know.
If not, I want to coin the term
participatory.
Oh, okay. If not, I want to coin the two terms, and I need to get a trademark for this, but like participatory passion or collective crucifixion. So yeah, if you're like a pastor and you want to like steal that for your Sunday sermon because it alliterates, that's mine. So, you at least have to cite the Babylonian. But yeah, but like pretty much like
put it
like
on the
when
slide.
we're suffering, like that's one of the things is we can remember is that he also suffered. Yeah. No, you actually have to play this audio clip right here. Yeah. So
we're gonna pause.
Wow.
Let's pause. Let's turn the lights down. We gotta play this video of the Babylonian real quick, just to make sure that we get we gotta hear it from Michael's voice.
Yeah. Dude. Well, you're the one who explained it. So yeah. Oh yeah. I guess I coined the term. So yes.
You coined the term.
So yeah, there you go. So yeah, anyways, that's good. Sorry, I mostly just wanted to coin those terms. But what was I going to say? Yeah, that's so.
All right.
Anyways, that's
I'm
problematic
down.
that it's taking that away. That's
orthodoxy index. It goes down to 6.5 on my part, from my view.
6.5.
And you said you were saying
for
like
an average
like
of
a 6.
6.25.
6.25.
6.25 average. Yeah. Peter's gospel. You could call this the patriarch gospel, the gospel of the patriarchy. No women allowed. Yeah, there you have it. So yeah, that is the gospel of Peter the patriarch. And next week we are going to be jumping into some more Pontius Pilate fan fiction, so hopefully you're into that. And in 2 weeks, like I said, we are going to be talking a little bit about the backstory of that cross. Well, actually the cross doesn't preach there, but that cross in Hades. So until then, Peter, what should we be doing?
I think we should Bible on.
Bible on.